Well, hello, I'm Randy Wilson with the Family Research Council and the Watchman on the Wall Initiative. I'm the National Field Director for church ministries there. I move across the country engaging pastors, building relationships with pastors. We believe that our pastors are, you the pastors are, our last best hope in this land. And so we want to work together, which is why I have two of our um, what we call P50 pastors online with us today, Dr. Kevin Baird in South Carolina and Dr. Ron Johnson in Indiana. I'm going to talk about the stand events that both of them have done in recent days in their particular state, and go back first to the national stand simulcast that we did in Houston, Texas, and that was done because the mayor of Houston subpoenaed five pastors in that city, subpoenaed their messages. Not only their messages, but communication between them and their congregations, which, as you can imagine, is an incredible breach of what we have heard often, that separation of church and state. But in most cases, that's been turned around. And what we saw in Houston was what we are trying to guard against is the government encroaching on our churches today. So not long after that, a couple weeks, Dr. Kevin Baird in South Carolina began organizing a state stand event where he called pastors to the State House in Columbia, South Carolina. Dr. Kevin Baird, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Tell us about the stand event that you hosted there. Why was that important? What was the response of the pastors? How did you gather them? Did all the denominations show up? Was there a unified effort? Talk to us about that a bit.
Yeah, thanks, Randy, for having me. Appreciate the opportunity. We had been working for several years, networking pastors in this state, trying our best to solicit their participation in public policy matters, not just at the national level, but on the state levels as well. And so we had a little groundwork laid already in the state when the Houston issue arose. And the Houston issue seemed to catalyze many pastors, in fact, lots of pastors who were peripheral or kind of outside and not really interested. That issue seemed to spark greater concern and interest. And so we decided, and it just so happened it was in conjunction with the national event, to gather them together. It was strictly a pastor's event, and to meet at the Capitol steps in Columbia, South Carolina. And we were excited to see just how many began to express interest. We also created a document which was read that day, which was signed by well over 500 pastors in our state. And if I went down the list of the denominations and particular fellowships that were represented, it would be across denominational lines.
So it sounds like there's great concern in South Carolina regarding the direction that our representatives were taking in regards to what we felt, our values that we felt in the local community. They were not following our lead, and so seeing that nationally, seeing that occur in Houston was a wake-up call. Is that what you heard and saw?
Exactly, and it catalyzed everybody. It actually pulled in pastors who were not normally involved, and perhaps the greatest thing, there were somewhere between 60 and 75 pastors who showed up on site for the gathering. There was probably 200 to 300 people in the crowd. A lot of great energy with regards to all that took place. But the most important point, I think, to say was it provided what I call a stake in the ground. And all of those pastors that were on site and multitudes of pastors have contacted me with the question, where do we go from here? What do we do from here? How can we now make a difference? So, you know, as they say, what the enemy wanted for evil, God is turning around for good, and what a Houston mayor may have thought was going to put the church in a box may be the very thing that springs the church out of her box. So we're seeing a lot of good things take place out of that.
So true. I've never seen an issue get the attention of so many pastors across the country. I was on the phone inviting pastors to a Kansas City Watchman event there right after the mayor of Houston subpoenaed those pastors, and just about every one of the pastors I called and talked to were aware of and were somewhat outraged about what the Houston mayor did. So what did you hear at all from legislators? I got to be a part of that event there in South Carolina that you organized, Dr. Baird, and got to watch that unfold and saw the number of pastors who, you're right, they were engaged, they were informed, and they were ready to make something happen, and the many that also joined on the steps of the Capitol as well, the grassroots folk among the state. Did the legislators respond to that event after the fact? Did you hear anything from them at all?
Some, and most of it was encouraging. We promoted the event as a pastors-only event. We want pastors to come forward, be up front and center. We had several, government officials who wanted to participate. I understand why, but we attempted to make it just a pastors' event. And of course, we are being contacted in order to use our influence with some legislation that's going through South Carolina, and we're happy to look at that. Right now, we've just begun to organize at another level, trying to see what things we want to put our influence behind, get some wins under our belt, and not just defend our values, but actually see our values restored and move forward. And we're trying to do our best in South Carolina to put the offense on the field. We've been playing defense too long, so we're going to do our best to press forward our agenda.
So true. Dr. Ron Johnson, you're in Indiana. You launched the Indiana Pastors Alliance, and not long after Dr. Baird organized that event in South Carolina, you also organized an event in Indianapolis, Indiana, and called pastors to the State House to do much the same thing. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, as Kevin said, we were deeply concerned with what was happening in Houston, but unable to, pull up and head on out. So we felt like we needed to do something here with pastors who were sharing those same concerns. And, with Kevin being my older brother in the faith, I just pretty much piggybacked on him. We even stole his banner, and we just put Indiana Pastors Alliance at the bottom. So it was a great event, and I appreciated his initial leadership. And then we piggybacked on it, and we drafted our own declaration that really centered around three non-negotiables, as I called them, in the faith. The first one, of course, is the sanctity of life. Second one is what we call the dignity of marriage, traditional marriage between a man and a woman. And then the third one was the gift of religious liberty, which is the cornerstone of all the other, liberties that we enjoy. And so we really wanted to communicate loudly and clearly to the folks at the State House, our elected officials, that these are non-negotiables for us, and we will do everything in our power to make sure, as Dr. Baird shared, that we push forward on the offensive on these issues, not sit back passively, and that if they're not going to defend and honor God's word, then we're going to do our very, very best to find elected officials who will.
Yeah, I so appreciate that, Ron. I know that pastors across the country are watching, and they are beginning to organize their own stand events. I get to be a part of one in Salem, Oregon, coming up in February, actually on Valentine's Day. Just when it dropped. We're going to stand at the State House there in Salem, Oregon, declaring those same things about marriage, family, life, and religious liberty. Incredibly important issues that pretty much say everything that we are standing for and really are foundational in our country. I know there are pastors in Ohio, particularly JC Church, that are looking to pull together a stand event in Ohio, and we'd love to see these roll out across the country in every state, certainly by 2016. And I love the way you guys have piggybacked off one another, and that's pretty much what we want to do at the Watchman on the Wall. with the Watchman on the Wall initiative is on our website, watchmanpastors.org. We have many messages on the issues of the day, on life, on marriage, on religious liberty and freedom, messages that have been spoken, delivered by pastors across the country, and we're directing pastors to go to that site and pull down those messages. And with those, we have bulletin inserts and outlines and PowerPoint and video clips to go with them, but to not have to recreate the wheel. We don't have time to do that, but let's get the word out to our people across the country, call them to their place as the true leaders of this land. And the example you have already set, Dr. Baird, Dr. Johnson, is what we want to be about promoting and multiplying across this country. Any response from your elected officials there in Indiana, Ron, regarding the stand event you hosted?
We had a couple that contacted us via email that said that they could not be there, but certainly supported us. The interesting thing is, in both South Carolina and Indiana, and I know Kevin and I have talked about this, these are conservative states with super majorities in our state house of people who are supposed to share our values. And yet when it comes to pushing forth these no-brainer pieces of legislation, like marriage, like life, it's like they don't get it. And so just the fact that we're getting pastors there on the grounds at the State House, I think, is a first step just to let them know we're here and we're watching, and we're getting more and more vocal. This was like a first coming out party for us with the Indiana Pastors Alliance, and so I didn't have nearly the response that Kevin had. We had about 20 pastors from all over the state and probably several hundred people that showed up, plus the media. And so, when you get the media to come out, it's a win most of the time if they get the story right. And for us, it meant we had got some play in the Indianapolis Star, which was great.
Yeah, we do want to make that a media event, to speak to the media on terms of what we are standing for. And I think everybody can stand for that: life, marriage, and religious freedom. Ron, I know that in the state of Indiana, you all are pulling together a RFRA, some RFRA legislation, religious freedom, religious information freedom. Tell me.
Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
There it is. Kevin, do you know if the legislators are putting that piece of legislation to the State House there?
Yes, they have religious liberty legislation, as well as some are trying to do some combating with regards to the same-sex marriage tsunami that all of us are facing. A part of me is concerned, if I'm going to hitchhike on what Ron said, a part of me is concerned that we have to pass legislation in order to codify what has already been passed over 200 years ago in our Constitution, that we have a right for religious belief, conscience, and to function in our businesses and our churches and in life without fear of reprimand or repercussion from our government. It's totally out of hand. If we're not in tyranny now, we're on the brink of full-blown tyranny. And if pastors don't speak up, it will be the last voice that this citizenry will ever hear before they go into a new dark age. So these are really important times, and it's really important that pastors step up to the front line.
Well, that's an incredible point, that we don't have to really pass any more legislation. It is there in the Constitution if we'll understand it, know it, read it, and then hold our elected officials to that document that they swear allegiance to as they take office, which leads to another point. Our people are frustrated because they elect individuals to office that are saying all the things that they believe in, and then they get to the office at the State House or in Washington, D.C., and they become a wholly different person there with a whole different set of values. And so that puts the onus on us, we the people, the leaders of the land, to call, interact with them, write them, and hold them accountable to what they said they were going to go to office, to that particular office, and stand for. And as we see that not occurring, then we have got to raise individuals in our own communities and elect them into office in the next election cycle until we get a solid, continuous group of elected officials that will actually stand for the Constitution and stand for our beliefs and values.
Absolutely. You know, Kevin has talked with me before. I think we shared the same passion here that the incrementalism and the compromise is so much a part of the process just means we continue to give up more and more of our liberties. And you know, it's one thing to do that in the political realm, but there's something about the pulpit which is much more prophetic. And the pulpit realizes, you know, truth is like a plumb line, and there's no compromise on either side. You hang up the plumb line and you call people to obey God and to follow His ways. And, you know, I love the phrase, I think it was John Witherspoon, he said that the government should be for the glory of God and the good of the people. And if we'll get the glory of God part right, if we'll make sure that we live and legislate in ways that bring glory to God, the direct result of that is there will be good for the people. But if we focus on the whims of the people and we lose God and we lose His glory, we're going to be in a mess, and that's exactly where we are right now. So Kevin and I are both kind of fed up in the sense that you know, it's kind of a take no prisoners. We'd love to see these networks grow, these alliances grow to where literally the church begins to dictate who we see elected, because if you know, there's so many grassroots people that are unified around a common vision that you don't have a chance if you don't share our values.
Kevin?
Did I say that well, Kevin?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Ron, you say it most articulately. So, yeah, absolutely. We have got to develop a new playbook. I was talking to one political operative recently, and what he said hurt, but it was right, and that is evangelical Christians are naive in some ways when it comes to politics. I would also add that we're too nice. You know, Christians are about redemption. We're about second chances. But when you send a group of Republicans to Washington, D.C., and they bring forth a tepid 20-week fetal pain bill that they refuse to even back, there's something wrong with us as evangelicals to continue to send these people back. Something is systemically wrong when they tell us they have our values, and then they won't even stand with the most tepid of pro-life legislation. I no longer believe in an incremental type of strategy. We have got to have people who will paint big picture, bold vision, bold color. Those are the types of leaders we need, and we're not seeing them. And so it's going to take a new playbook, and I think pastors are the ones to help bring about that new strategy and bring about a new day in America as well as our states.
Well, we so believe that. I know Tony Perkins, the president of the Family Research Council, has staked his career on the work with the pastors and watchmen on the wall. As I said, he believes they're our last best hope, and he also understands this because he sees that we're not dealing with a political crisis, but rather a spiritual crisis. And so we are doing everything we can, standing with you, Kevin and Ron, and the many other pastors across this land to get the information out to their people and raise them up to hold their elected officials accountable. And that's at the community level as well, the city council, county commissioners, the mayor, the school board, etc. We've really got to do our work there. They're looking for candidates to sit in those seats of influence there. And those candidates are sitting in the pews of our churches across this country. So there's where we start. In the meantime, pastors to encourage their people to communicate with their elected officials. In fact, a way best to do that is through the raising up a culture impact team in their church, which we have resources, manual that gives the church everything they need to know to put together and stand up a culture impact team. I know you're working in that arena, Dr. Baird, and so are you, Dr. Johnson, and your churches, and they are a great help to the pastor, so he doesn't have to do all the work. Right. And the pastor can rely on that team to help him educate the body of believers.
Yes, absolutely. I have a cultural engagement director in my church, so I have a ministry area assigned to keep me abreast of legislation, particularly at the state level. Most pastors have no idea what gets through in their states and how much influence they can really have in their states if they would get engaged. And there are people in their church that would love to help them do that.
And Randy, my cultural engagement person was so effective, he just got hired by our governor. So that's when I get very excited about launching people from the local church into public service, like Daniel and David and some of the greats we read about in the Bible. So we're in the process of regrouping in that area, but it's a good problem that we have.
That's exactly what our founding pastors, our patriot pastors, did. They raised many of their congregations to be signers of the Declaration, governors of states, signers of the Constitution. So we need our pastors. And pastors, we are there for you at Watchmen on the Wall. Go to watchmenpastors.org. Join Kevin, join Ron, and the many other pastors across this land. Let's begin to communicate back and forth. Let us know how we can help. I'd love to come out and visit. We're going to bring this down to a close. Any final comments, Ron or Kevin?
I'll jump in. I'll let my esteemed colleague finish. I think there's a misunderstanding in the local church, Randy, about public policy. A lot of our confusion lies in the fact that we apply a lot of the commandments on loving your neighbor and these types of things to public policy when really they're really supposed to be about how we treat one another in our neighborhoods, in personal relationships. And so we have this hands-off approach to public policy instead of having, as Dr. Baird shared, that nice approach where we just lay back and roll over. But when we're talking about public policy and something that impacts every single person, either in our state or in our nation, that is not a time to roll over and pretend like things are just going to magically get better or the Antichrist is going to appear or something. We have a mandate to rule and reign and take dominion, which means also over the areas of government and law and the marketplace and economics and every sphere of life. And so we really need a better theology of engagement, and I know Kevin shares that passion.
Yes, absolutely. We have to develop as evangelicals really a better theology of the future. We can't learn a lot from our enemies' values, but sometimes they have an incredible strategy, and usually it's long-term. And we've got to begin to think that way, that if Jesus isn't going to come tomorrow, and if indeed he may still have a good while left, despite what others may say, we're going to have to develop a long-term game plan in order to turn this nation around. And I honestly believe that can be done, but we're going to have to begin to see the gospel as prevailing. We're going to have to get engaged and understand that we are the tools that God uses. And as we get engaged, that we can anticipate His hand to move, and we can return this nation, not just defend our values, but return this nation back to its Judeo-Christian ethic. And so I want to leave the people that are hearing our voices with some encouragement. This is not something that's just futile. This is something that can actually be changed.
Amen.
So doable if we'll come together and unite around what we believe on the issues of faith, family, and freedom, which we all agree upon. You're right, Dr. Baird. I totally agree with that. This nation can be brought back as a people that will honor God once again. Dr. Johnson, I know we spoke on the importance of speaking messages on the issues of the day last week, and so I'd encourage pastors to go back and listen to that 15-minute Google Hangout that we did there. I appreciate your time there. And guys, thanks for coming on board today. And so appreciate your work in your particular states. And we continue to work together, pray to God as one, asking for His favor. And we're asking that He will cause the Holy Spirit to move across this land and bring revival, a revival that will turn our eyes back to Him and honor Him once again. God bless you guys. Take care.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.